Hello guys, welcome to a new video with Fischer series. Today look around number 5 of the Fischer Reshevsky matchup of 1961. A beautiful clash of generations, the best of the US during that time, and this is perhaps their most beautiful game. So let's just dive straight into it. Fischer has the black pieces and Reshevsky starts with d4. Knight to f6, c4, and Fischer played g6 in game number 1, but he actually lost that game. So he tried something else, e6, knight to c3, and here you can play the Nimzo Indian, but Fischer plays the Queen's Gambit declined with d5. And Reshevsky was a huge fan of the exchange variation, so he takes the pawn, in which we can take back with the knight or the pawn. And Fischer actually annotated this game in his 60 memorable games, and he says, e takes d5 leads to the kind of root pushing that always bored me. So that's why he takes with the knight to keep it more dynamic. Now knight to f3. And c5, striking in the center, the semi-tirage. Here you shouldn't take the pawn, since then we have knight takes, pawn takes, and we will win this pawn back. And you have a weakness on c3, an isolated pawn. So that's why after c5 we have e3, defending our pawn. Now knight to c6, building up the pressure in the center. Bishop to d3, putting it on a beautiful diagonal. Bishop e7, still not taking the pawn because of the same continuation. After bishop e7, simply both sides castle. Now a3 by Reshevsky, preventing the knight jumping in to kick away this bishop, since the bishop is really beautifully placed here, looking towards the king. C takes d4 and e takes d4. And Fischer says, fairly typical of the semi-tirage formation. White has the freer game and attacking prospects. I mean, if you look at the bishops here, beautifully placed, the knight can jump in, the queen can come in. But the drawback of his isolated d-pawn should not be minimized. Chances are even. So Fischer attacks it immediately with knight to f6, a double attack now. So the bishop drops back to c2 to defend it with the queen and the knight. Now b6, the best move, since our light squared bishop is really trapped in here. We want to bring it to b7 and look at this beautiful diagonal. So now queen to d3, bishop to b7, and bishop to g5. Since if we take the knight, you take it back, but then it's checkmate. So logically you have to defend this diagonal with g6, but it does weaken the dark squares. After g6, we see rook f to e1, rook to e8, and h4, the best move in the position. And Fischer says, Evans criticized this aggressive pass. Evans is a famous grandmaster. I don't see how else white can make headway. He has to create some kingside threats before black consolidates and piles up on his d-pawn. So Fischer actually respects this move, while other grandmasters thought it was too aggressive. After h4, rook to c8, rook to c1, and knight to d5. After knight to d5, the knight jumps into e4. It was defended before. And after knight to e4, Fischer says, after playing f5, I knew this was an ugly positional blunder, but I actually thought black would get the better of it after knight to c3, bishop takes g5, pawn takes g5, knight takes c3, pawn takes c3, and knight to a5, threatening taking the knight and then taking this pawn. But what Fischer actually missed is that, okay, Reshevsky did play knight to c3, but after bishop takes, we do not take with the pawn, we take with the knight. And now a beautiful threat on this pawn. Fischer defends it with his knight, also attacking the queen. Queen goes to e3, but now queen takes d4. But the problem in this position is Reshevsky has a beautiful move. Knight to b5. Fischer says, marvelously alert. After the practically forced trade of queens, white wins the exchange because of the imminent fork on d6. This is a huge threat, and you cannot defend it, bringing the queen back, because then you take the knight. We have to keep an eye on the knight. So Fischer takes the queen, and after pawn takes, not simply bringing the knight back to d5, because then we have this fork, rook to b8, knight takes, rook takes, and then bishop to a4. Double attack on the knight, but if you defend it with the rook, then you lose this pawn. So here, Not knight to d5, but knight takes g2. Beautiful move. Since after king takes, we have knight to d4, discovered check. Bishop goes to e4. And here Fischer says, this game was played at the Beverly Hilton Hotel in Los Angeles. And I can still hear the audience gasping with each blow, thinking each of us had overlooked it in turn. Fischer is winning. Reshevsky is winning. The true state of affairs will crystallize in a matter of moves. After bishop to e4, we have bishop takes, knight takes, and knight takes b5. So there's no fork on d6, but the fork comes on f6. King to f7 and knight takes e8. Rook takes e8. And here, if you look at the position, white has two rooks. We have a rook and a knight, but we're up 2 pawns. So still everything can happen. Now a4, kicking away the knight, since the knight is defending a crucial c7 square where the rook wants to come in. Knight to d6 and rook to c7. And here you shouldn't play rook to e7, then we have the other rook doubling up on the c file and white has a beautiful position. So here, king goes up. And after king f6, we see the rooks doubling anyway, because you do not want to give black play in the position after rook takes. We have rook to c8 and black is coming in here. So that's why after king to f6, we see rook to c1. Now, h6 saving this pawn, and rook takes a7. Knight goes to e4. And now rook to a6, simply wanting to win this pawn. Fischer tries to play on the d file. And here perhaps the best move for Reshevsky is just take this pawn. Double your rooks, take this pawn then. But in this position, Reshevsky played rook to c2. And rook to c2 is a bit passive, because you shouldn't really be scared of the rook coming into d2, because Fischer simply brings the rook to d3 now, trying to win this pawn. And if you actually defend it with the king, we have a really nice move, rook to b3, and now the position is holding for Fischer. So here actually we see rook takes b6, rook takes e3, and now a5. Reshevsky is running with his pawn to make a queen. f4. And here, a really interesting move by Reshevsky. Rook to f2. Giving back the exchange. Since after knight takes, king takes, Reshevsky is arguing that your rook cannot defend this rolling a pawn. But actually it can. Rook to e4, b4, and rook to e3. a6, but now rook to a3. Rook goes to c6. And now, after rook to c6, during that time we actually had the game after some moves, after 42 moves here. The next move would be sealed and the game would continue the next day. So Fischer actually sealed his move. And they probably both thought about this position the whole night. And the next day, the sealed move was the only move to keep the advantage for black, g5. After g5, h takes g5 check, h takes g5, and now b5. But the problem is we have some play on the king side now. g4. Rook goes to c8, trying to give checks to the king. King to f5, b6, and whenever 2 pawns are on the 6th rank, 1 rook cannot save both of them, so you are guaranteed to make a queen. After b6, g3 check, king goes back to e1, rook a1 check, king goes to e2, now g2, wanting to make a queen here, rook f8 check, king goes to e4 and rook takes f4, since you cannot defend both pawns. So now king takes, b7, and in this position Fischer makes a queen, but actually there's a more forcing way to immediately win this position. As you can see from the engine, it's mate in 5, and that's king to e4. Why is king to e4 a beautiful move here? Well, if you make a queen, the king is defending those 3 squares. And now rook a2 check. And as you can see, those squares are defended. Those squares are defended. This square is defended. So only 2 moves are king to e1 or king to d1. And it will be checkmate like this. But actually, Fischer played in this position. He didn't play king to e4. He made a queen, which prolongs the game a bit. But still, Fischer is winning after Reshevsky makes a queen as well. And now we see a lot of checks. But at the end, Fischer finds a winning move, king to f5. Since if you try to keep giving checks here, queen b5 check, king goes to f6. And, well, for example, queen b2 check again. Now e5. And you cannot give a check like this. It's defended by the queen. And this is simply winning for Fischer. I mean, this was such a beautiful game played by both sides. I hope you liked this video. If so, please like, subscribe or comment. And I'll see you on the next video. Bye bye.